Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. I've got my naval historian's hat firmly on today, and honestly, I am absolutely thrilled to guide you through this source material. We're going to dive deep into the archives and unpack a highly classified military mission from 1971. We're talking about Operation Python, and let me tell you, it is an absolute masterclass in naval strategy, stealth, and just brilliant calculated execution. When we analyze historical conflicts, it's incredibly rare to find a single operation executed with such insane precision that it literally rewrites the logistical landscape of an entire war. So this isn't just a story about some ships in the water. It's a profound study in how applying the exact right amount of pressure at exactly the right moment can completely unravel a massive, complex logistical network. To really wrap our heads around the historical magnitude of this event, we have to start by asking one central defining question. How in the world did the Indian Navy manage to effectively dismantle their opponent's critical supply chain in a single night? To get it, you have to picture the operational environment of the 1971 war. The sprawling, wild expanse of the Arabian Sea is an absolute logistical nightmare for any naval commander. Try finding a target, coordinating an entire fleet, and executing a flawless strike in pitch-black darkness without modern GPS or satellite tracking. It required an astonishing, almost unbelievable level of tactical discipline. The stakes were incredibly high, and out there in those turbulent waters, the margin for error was practically zero.
Okay, let's dive into this. When you're looking at the massive, sprawling theater of the 1971 war, it's so easy to just get entirely lost in the sheer scale of the whole thing. I mean, you've got vast troop movements across thousands of miles, immense air campaigns, and really complex geopolitical maneuvering happening on the world stage. But as military historians, we know a secret: massive, sweeping wars are very often decided by hyper-focused, singular strategic targets. And in this specific theater, amidst all that vast space, there was one absolutely critical vulnerability that stood out like a sore thumb: Karachi Port. The macro-level war was immense, sure, but the micro-level key to winning it? That was entirely concentrated in this one heavily fortified location.
So why this specific port? Well, it boils down to the hard economics of war. Karachi Port wasn't just a convenient place to park some ships. It was the absolute logistical lifeline for the defending forces. Back in 1971, this port was the primary entry point for almost all imported military weapons and ammunition. But even more importantly, it housed their massive oil and fuel reserves. They say an army marches on its stomach, right? Well, a modern Navy and Air Force absolutely run on oil. Plus, it was the main hub for essential goods and everyday supplies. Strategically speaking, if you could shut down this specific port, you would completely sever the supply lines they needed to keep their army in the field. It was quite literally the cardiovascular center of their entire war effort.
Let's move to and see how this builds, because the historical context leading right up to this moment is absolutely crucial. Just days prior, the Indian Navy had already delivered a massive blow to this exact same port with a first strike, which was known as Operation Trident. But here's the thing about standard naval warfare doctrine: you don't just hit a target and walk away. Success relies on relentless pressure. You can't give the opposition a single second to assess the damage, clear the harbor, or catch their breath. Recognizing this, military planners immediately spun up a second, highly classified mission. And so, on the night of December 8, 1971, Operation Python was officially launched. As nightfall descended, a brand new strike group began its quiet, deeply calculated approach toward the hostile coast. The instrument of this relentless pressure was a highly specialized, secret strike force. Right at the very center of it all was the Indian missile boat INS Vinash. Now, missile boats from this era were relatively small and packed a huge punch, but they were ultimately kind of vulnerable if they got caught out in the open during daylight. Because of that, INS Vinash definitely didn't sail alone. It was flanked by two exceptionally powerful escort warships, the frigates INS Trishul and INS Talwar. Try to picture this: a small, lethal missile carrier heavily protected by larger warships, just creeping slowly and stealthily through the rolling waves of the Arabian Sea. Their mission was crystal clear, but man, the tension aboard those darkened decks as they slipped into hostile waters must have been absolutely off the charts.
To actually pull off this level of surprise, the fleet had to rely on a critical and honestly exceptionally difficult naval stealth tactic: strict radio silence. And this goes way beyond just, turning off the communication radios so the crews can't chat with each other. It means halting absolutely all electronic transmissions. No active radar, nothing. Back in 1971, coastal defense systems heavily relied on picking up the electronic emissions of approaching ships. By going completely dark, the Indian fleet was essentially navigating blind to electronic support measures. They had to rely entirely on traditional dead reckoning and absolute, unwavering tactical discipline to slip past enemy radar and sonar undetected. This meant the defenders on the coast had absolutely zero early warning of the storm that was creeping toward them in the dark.
Which brings us to a super fascinating psychological element of naval strategy here. The historical sources clearly point out a prevailing assumption among the defending forces. They honestly thought an attack wouldn't happen again so soon. And this just highlights the absolute strategic brilliance of the timing. Standard military logic usually says that a fleet needs significant time to rearm, refit, and basically regroup after a massive strike like Operation Trident. The defenders were effectively lulled into a false sense of security, figuring the worst was over and focusing all their energy on recovery efforts. They simply didn't expect lightning to strike twice in the exact same spot. And because of that, their defensive posture was significantly lowered right at the exact moment Operation Python was silently slipping into striking range.
This meticulous, nerve-wracking approach continued for hours in total darkness. And then, the clock hit approximately 10 p.m. That was the exact moment the absolute stillness of the Arabian Sea was violently, irreversibly shattered. Cruising right at optimal attack speed, the strike force locked onto their targets. The sensory shift in that single moment would have been totally staggering. Imagine it. The quiet, tense darkness is suddenly pierced by the blinding, roaring light of Stick's anti-ship missiles launching straight from the deck of INS Vinash into the night sky. After hours and hours of creeping stealth, the element of supplies was violently dropped, instantly transitioning into a phase of total, devastating offensive action.
And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer scale and speed of the execution, which was just staggering. Within mere seconds of those missiles launching into the sky, they found their marks perfectly. Karachi Port was instantly turned into a massive fireball. To understand the physics of what happened here, when these missiles struck the Kimari oil farm, they didn't just start a normal fire. They detonated massive industrial oil tanks, which superheated all the surrounding infrastructure and kicked off a catastrophic chain reaction. Tank after tank violently exploded, sending shockwaves rocking up and down the entire coastline. The resulting inferno was so unimaginably huge that historical operational logs and eyewitness accounts tell us the thick, black pillar of smoke was clearly visible from kilometers away, and it burned for several days.
Let's objectively break down the hard, logistical facts of this devastation. The tactical targets they hit yielded a catastrophic strategic impact. By completely annihilating those massive oil reserves, the strike triggered immediate severe fuel shortages that grounded enemy aircraft and completely halted their transport. On top of that, several key naval vessels and merchant ships were severely damaged or outright destroyed while anchored in what was supposed to be a safe harbor. The vital port infrastructure itself sustained such intense thermal and blast damage that normal operations were just entirely shut down for days. By systematically severing these highly specific supply lines, the operation triggered a complete logistical collapse. It left the opposing forces practically paralyzed, completely unable to sustain any kind of prolonged mechanized defense.
So the crucial point is, when you look at all of this data, it comes down to a single truly astonishing number: 0. There were 0 major losses for the attacking Indian fleet. Executing a highly complex strike right at the heart of a heavily defended coastal stronghold is inherently incredibly risky, but the tactical execution here was just flawless. Once those missiles were away, the fleet didn't stick around to admire their handiwork. They executed a textbook hit-and-run maneuver, whipping their vessels around and retreating at maximum speed under the cover of darkness and the absolute chaos they just unleashed at the port. By the time the defending coastal batteries could even comprehend what had just hit them, or try to organize any kind of cohesive counterfire, the attacking ships were already safely out of range.
You know, as a historian, I always find immense value in asking the counterfactual question: what if the attack had actually failed? It is such a fascinating scenario to consider. Think about it. If INS Vinash had been detected early, or if those escort vessels had been engaged by coastal aircraft, the element of surprise would have vanished in an instant. The Indian strike force would have faced the full, concentrated wrath of the defending air force and shore batteries. Actually, if the mission had been aborted or repelled, those crucial supply lines at Karachi would have remained wide open. The opposing forces would have retained their operational fuel and maritime strength. Which means the entire logistical timeline and the ultimate outcome of the 1971 war might have been drastically, profoundly different.
To wrap up our historical analysis today, we really have to reflect on the objective, enduring strategic legacy of Operation Python. It proved unequivocally that a modern Navy's role extends way beyond merely patrolling and protecting territorial waters.
It demonstrated the profound capability to execute precise, deep strikes directly at the strategic heart of an opponent's infrastructure. The flawless strategy and calculated risk taken by Naval Command permanently altered the logistical realities of that conflict. And honestly, that brings up a really compelling question to leave you with. When you look at how perfectly executed and highly classified this operation was, how many other brilliant, secret strategic maneuvers are currently buried deep in the military archives right now, just waiting to completely change our understanding of modern naval history? Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating historical explainer with me. Keep asking questions, keep examining the sources, and I'll see you next time.